What's up everyone? Before we get started on today's video, I think it is important to know how it came to be. Now, I have had this YouTube channel for almost a decade now and have wanted to do something with it. At the time of this recording, I have less than 20 videos on my channel, and mostly it's due to a lack of vision on what market I could fill. Now, I knew I wanted it to be religious-based, especially within Catholicism. After talking about it with Kevin from Non-Trad Catholic, check out his channel by the way. Not only have I made some appearances, he's really got some thought-provoking stuff on there. But anyway, so Kevin made a fantastic point when I asked him for some ideas. Right now, Catholic YouTube is saturated with content directed to addressing Protestant content. Trent Horn, while not of any particular religion, did not identify as atheist and was raised by a Jewish father and a Protestant, who was ex-Catholic, by the way. Scott Hahn is a Protestant convert, Jimmy Akin was a Presbyterian convert, and Brian Holdsworth is actually not a Protestant convert, but his videos still address the Protestant issues due to his struggle with figuring out which form of Christianity to follow. What the Catholic YouTube market has a lack of is content directed to people like Kevin. Those that have fallen away from Catholicism and thus have a stronger concept of Catholicism than our Protestant brothers and sisters, as well as just the atheist agnostic community in general. And he's right. I think part of that is expressed in some of the Catholics in the Discord group that I helped to start. They were talking about how they have a frustration or don't enjoy talking with atheists and debating with atheists. Mostly that's due to a lack of common ground between Catholics and atheists, which at least that common ground can be found within the Protestant community. Now, upon realizing this, I decided to go ahead and charge into this area. I actually love finding that common ground and starting the conversation there. In fact, my first appearance on YouTube after my YouTube hiatus was actually on Kevin's channel. I'll put a link in the description to that video. I love talking with atheists and exploring ideas, as well as helping to make clear what is often unclear within the church. I then was asking around that Discord community for ideas on a video to start off this channel and series in earnest, and another ex-Catholic, goes by the name Intrinsically Ordered, had a fantastic idea. To address ichtheism, or to even see if we can even talk about God. So here we are, and with that long intro out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So, like I said, the topic of today's video is ichtheism, or agnosticism, or theological non-cognitivism. Now, wait a minute, James, that sounds made up and nonsensical. Well, congratulations, you just described ichtheism. Now, in all seriousness, ichtheism is the position that nothing about God can be known, which is supported by many theists, including Pascal, the famous gambler, and Thomas Aquinas, the angelic doctor who didn't burn enough of his works if you had asked me when I was in college. But instead of letting me tell you what ichtheism thinks about God, let me play a clip from Chasing Smoke, who kindly gave me permission to use his video.
Science is the gold standard for human understanding. While evidence might be anything that makes a person believe a claim, if you want other people to take that claim seriously, it's gotta go through science. And there's a very good reason for that. Science is based on empirical evidence and logical reasoning, and it's used to make predictions about the world that can be consistently tested and verified. Theists like to think their idea of God helps to explain the universe. In fact, many theists think that it's possible for us to have scientific evidence for God, or maybe even that we've found evidence of God already. It would be great if we could find some evidence of God to scientifically study. The problem is, the only kind of evidence that science can deal with is objective, testable, physical evidence. And when it comes to God, that kind of evidence is impossible. The concept of God is by its very nature one that cannot be supported by physical evidence. Consider the traditional characteristics of God: omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, omnibenevolence. In order to test whether another being knew everything or had omniscience, you would need to know everything. In order to test whether another being was everywhere at once, you would need to be everywhere at once. No human is capable of testing these traits or even identifying them, so we see there's no possible way to recognize if another being truly has these types of characteristics. You would just have to take that being's word for it. And that means there's no scientific way to confirm these characteristics are present in a being, or, for that matter, that it's even possible for them to be.
Now, as you can see, he puts forth that knowledge comes from science, and since God can't be studied by the scientific method, we cannot know God. Some go as far as to say that we can't even say he exists because any attempt to do so leads to statements like, there exists a married bachelor. To quote another atheist, they state that because existence requires placement in spacetime, to claim God exists outside of spacetime is an inherent contradiction, which you can see reflected by Chasing Smoke's video. Now, I will admit that when I first started working on this, I had one idea on how I was going to approach it. Then, as I was going over my notes with Xavier, the other founder of that Discord group, I had a eureka moment, and it changed how I view this question. So, what is the argument put forth by atheism, or specifically theological non-cognitism? Well, unfortunately, other than the basic agreement that God is unknowable, not a whole lot. But this isn't a dig or a diss at that particular position. It has to do with the fact that the position itself is so new. It was actually, the coined term was first coined in between the 1960s and 1990s, depending on whether it's atheism or agnosticism. Now, because of this, when I asked for insights, I got a lot of what I felt were weak or bad arguments in support of it. The most common ones were arguments specifically against the Abrahamic God, usually attacking the omni traits, and I am definitely going to do a video on those, don't worry. But the purpose of this video was to get even more foundational, because even if Catholicism is false, there could still be a God, and maybe it doesn't possess those traits, so now we actually can talk about it. This idea was actually addressed by another argument that was presented to me, and I heard different formulations. The best formulation I found was actually presented by Reddit user Adelu Adelaide. They pointed out that God or gods are inclusively defined, not exhaustively defined, meaning that we can constantly add to the list of things that the term God refers to, but never have it be exhausted. The example used was a square. That is, a square must have 4 sides. If it doesn't have these traits, it is not a square. That's what it means to be an exhaustive definition. Which leads into the final and appropriately most damning argument presented by the atheist, that there is not an agreed upon definition of the term God. For if it was exhaustively defined, then there would not be so many different descriptions of what a God is. Because of that, how can we claim to know God, or that God exists? Now, this, I believe, is an extension or a variation of a very common atheist argument. That is, if religion were true, well, that would mean that there would only be a singular religion. Since there is not a singular religion, and they all can't be true, they all must be false. Now, the mistake in that particular argument is that the possibility of only one of them being true and all false is also ignored. While it is true that it is possible for all to be false, it is still the case that one might be true and the rest false. Now, like I said, I personally found that these were weak formulations, but just like how atheists are often presented with weak formulations by people of the Christian faith, who have either a surface level or just past a surface level understanding, I want to give this benefit of the doubt. So, how would I argue for their conclusion that the question of if God exists is meaningless or unknowable? Now, this gets into what constitutes truth or meaning, and there are 2 popular theories for truth that I've come across. Coherence and correspondence theories of truth. The differing arguments I have seen be presented in support of atheism have been from, I believe, depending on which theory of truth one subscribes to. Now, what is coherence theory? Coherence theory is something similar to mathematics. The idea is that something is true because the conclusion itself follows from the premises. Like 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's nothing in the external world that requires 2 plus 2 equaling 4, but because 4 follows from those premises, it's true. Now, those that use this theory to argue against the idea of God being knowable or have meaning is that the definition of God is not coherent, that it leads to an internal contradiction. Correspondence theory is closer to like the scientific method as an example. Those that use this theory say that something is true only if it corresponds to reality. Now, people that use this theory to argue against the idea of God being knowable will say that there is no evidence of God in reality. Thus, no matter how good of a theory one presents, whether it's from Aquinas, Pascal, Calum, Anselm, or any other number of arguments, because we can't find evidence of it corresponding to reality, then it's either not true at best or unknowable at worst. Now, both of these fail, I believe, the same reason, just slightly different depending on your approach. The biggest reason for the failure is, I think, can be found within Anselm's ontological argument. It's very often, and rightly so, and as I will explain in a different video, critiqued for assuming the existence or the self-evident nature of God. Now, the shorthand critique is often that he defines God into existence. And this is because he assumes that the nature of God is self-evident, which it's not. The ichthyoist rightly points that out. Now, the ichthyoist, depending on how strong they are in their position, whether they just want to say that we can't know God and he is unknowable, so we can't even know if he exists, or will go so far as to say that because the definition or terminology being used to describe God is nonsensical, therefore it doesn't exist, a lot of times they end up defining God out of existence. Now, within coherence theory, by equating existence to space-time without demonstrating why it must be the case, that's how they define God out of existence. In correspondence theory, it's similar to the same thing, but less about definitions and closer to the black swan fallacy. Now, just because our experience has yet to show us a being that exists outside of space-time does not mean that reality is limited only to existing in space-time. As an example of this, correspondence theory would not state that there does not exist a planet with unicorns that exists beyond the edge of the observable universe. Why? Because such a planet could indeed correspond to reality. The issue is that because it is outside our realm of experience, because of the limitation of the speed of light, we can't know that. And that is the first issue within the ichthyoist position from my perspective. They have equated truth with knowledge. Something can be true even if we don't know it to be true. But James, what does that matter? Are we not trying to discover if we can know or even be able to discuss something? Well, yes, of course, but if we limit truth to only be what we know, then we become the arbiters of truth, and truth becomes subjective and mind-dependent, instead of objective and mind-independent. Therefore, for the correspondence theory of truth, the most honest answer is that at this point in time, we have yet to know or determine that existence is only in space-time. And until that has been demonstrated, any argument or worldview cannot exclude that possibility, especially if the very question we are looking to answer is if such a thing exists. To do so makes the position be circular. Alright, fine. So, strong atheism, the idea that God doesn't exist because to exist outside of space-time is flawed, but we still can't talk about if God exists or not because his nature is unknowable, and thus we can never know the answer to that question. Now, Aquinas would agree with this sentiment in part, at the very least, that yes, we cannot know the essence or nature of God. However, he continues on to say that from the effects of God's essence, and because those effects are dependent on him as their cause, we can know that he exists even if we don't know the essence of God itself. What does that mean in common everyday language? Well, you can look at me now and know that I have parents. You have no idea who they are, what they are, or anything like that, but you know that they exist. Why? Because you're able to determine from the nature of relationship between parent and child. In the same way, we don't need to know what the essence of God is, because the question on if a God exists or not is not one about the essence of God, but about the relationship between a creator and its creation. Pascal in his wager pointed out that we can know that infinity exists even if we don't know its nature because we have extension, and infinity is extension without limit. Same is true for the relationship between creator and creation. Even if we do not create in the sense of something from nothing in totality, which Aquinas also says God does not do, but again, that's another video and another topic. We do change and bring to being something that was not there before when we create art, ideas, or even a child. So due to our experience with the relationship of creator and created, we too can know that a God exists by exploring that relationship. In conclusion, the ichthyoist is correct that we cannot know what God is, and again, I'll make another video that goes into detail on exactly that aspect. What they are incorrect on is if we can know that a god is? The answer to that particular question isn't being answered in this video, and it's going to be the subject of future videos. What I was trying to address today was whether or not it was possible to know that a god exists. And I believe I have shown, and hopefully you can see that we do indeed can arrive at an answer to that we are able to know. The next question is, what is the answer to that question? Thank you for watching. Check out the Discord links in the bottom of the video. Check out the other videos as well. Once again, thanks to everyone who contributed to helping out with this video. It was a lot of fun getting back into really looking at the hard questions, and I'm excited to continue this journey and looking forward to making more videos on this subject and many more. Have a good one.